Good morning, and welcome to the home of Unitarian Universalism in Central Washington. I'm Chris Rader. I'm glad to be your celebrant this morning. Our worship leader is the Reverend Thomas Perchlik. If today is your first visit, we're so glad you're here. And of course, we're glad that everybody's here. We welcome every person of goodwill, just as you are. Whatever your religious background or beliefs, however you look or whom you love, you are welcome here. And you're all invited to stay after the service for coffee, treats, and conversation. And welcome to the folks on Zoom today. Zoom participants, you'll find the order of service and the song lyrics in the chat. Owen Barnes is today's Zoom host. And will the folks in this building please turn around and wave to the people on Zoom? And now take a minute, if you haven't already, and just briefly greet the people around you. We have a couple of announcements today. I'd like to mention, in case you're thinking, oh, we got to turn our air conditioning on. Well, we're working on the air conditioning. We had some trouble with it last year, got it fixed. The guy has been here already this spring and fixed a few things, put some coolant in, but we're waiting for a part. So please don't try to go back and fiddle with the thermostat. Wenatchee's Pride Festival is coming up in less than a month on Saturday, June 21st. And as usual, CUUF will have a booth to show solidarity with our LGBTQ friends. We need people to sign up to staff that booth for, I think they're 2-hour shifts. And there's a sign-up sheet back there on the Social Justice Bulletin Board. And on that same weekend, we will hold our annual yard sale. I think Amy Massey may have an announcement about that.
Thank you, Chris. Sorry about the double booking on that weekend, but I think that's the way our lives are. So great that we're supporting the Pride Fest. Hi, Rita.
Hi. So, Amy, what does this, and this have in common?
I don't know.
They're all things I need to get rid of.
Oh. Well, really, you can donate them to the CUUF yard sale.
Really? Can I donate my other junk? Treasures?
Well, sure. We aren't taking clothing, but yes, you can donate anything else as long as it's clean, not broken. You can bring it to the Blue House after the service for the next 3 Sundays in June.
What if I break my leg and I'm on crutches?
Oh dear, I hope that doesn't happen, but you can reach out to me, the church office, or Emily Soroki if you need help bringing stuff. You also are going to want to come on your crutches, hopefully not, and shop at the yard sale on June 20th and 21st, and we will have a lot of great things that you can buy.
Can I buy a politician?
Not at the yard sale, I'm sorry. I think they've all been bought.
Can I buy a ticket to heaven?
Oh, now you might get a heavenly deal on something, but sorry, no ticket to heaven. We don't know if there is a heaven, but if there was, you would not need a ticket. We're Universalists.
Well, what's our view on angels?
Well, my view is that anyone who volunteers with the yard sale or the Pride Fest or serving on committees already has a halo on their head. Please see me after the service or Emily Soroki if you would like to earn yours for the yard sale. And Bruce, if you're out there, you're in the line for a halo. Thank you for helping me this morning. We're going to have a lot of fun at the yard sale, and we'll be keeping things out of the landfill and raising money for the new building fund. So thanks for your support.
Thank you, Amy and Rita. Laura?
Sorry, I have another announcement. We have got 3 yards of compost out here from the Smith Recycle Self-Help Shop.
Thank you. Our fellowship buildings and our homes are located on the ancestral homeland of the Pisquosa, otherwise known as the Wenatchee Band of the Colville Confederated Tribes. Since time immemorial, the Pisquosa have lived here and been custodians of this land. We acknowledge that their land was infringed upon during the 1800s because the U.S. government broke treaty obligations and allowed uninvited white colonizers to settle on Pisquosa homeland. The Pisquosa still live here, still practice their cultural traditions, and are still working to have those treaty obligations fulfilled. And now Reverend Thomas has some opening words before we sing our first song.
Words from a colleague of mine, someone who works in the association, Heather Janulis. We come this day, called by war, by the suffering we inflict and endure when minds across borders fail to reason and compromise. We come this day called by loss, the deaths of those who served in our name, whose lives ended before their expected course in the service to a cause that was greater than their own. We come to this day called by hope. Hope that we will in some season finally surrender our swords for plowshares, and nation shall not lift up sword against nation, and we will all learn war no more. Above all, we come to this day called by peace. May we hear the song of peace in our hearts. May we proclaim its promise on our lips. May our remembrances today renew our struggle to reach the peace of justice, for we can never stay or rest until we have finally, at last, reached that heaven, wherever that may be.
Our opening song has a tune that's familiar to many of us. It's hard to sing this hymn without thinking of the words most associated with it, "Onward Christian Soldiers." Well, "Onward Christian Soldiers" promotes an aggressive, God and country, triumphal kind of faith. Instead, our version, "Forward Through the Ages," is a social gospel hymn whose words were written in 1908 by Frederick Lucian Hosmer. He was a Harvard-trained Unitarian minister who served congregations in Massachusetts, Illinois, Missouri, and California. He wrote this hymn for the installation of a minister for the First Unitarian Church of Berkeley, California. By the 1930s, it had become a key marching song of liberal Protestantism in the United States. So now let's rise in body or spirit to sing our opening song, "Forward Through the Ages," hymn 114. In Unitarian Universalist fellowships or congregations around the world, the chalice and flame symbolize people gathering together in loving community and inspiration. If you at home have your chalice with you, please join us now in lighting it. Here in the sanctuary, we will speak these lighting words in unison. We light this chalice to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and full heart, and to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair, with all her people one.
I always have a time story for a congregation of all ages. I was going through the library and I found this really fine book that enunciated all the basic ideas of peace building. So I'm going to start with that, but then I'm going to tell us, but it's not really a good story. It's just a bunch of ideas. And so then I'm going to tell you a story that embodies these ideas. The story book goes on for a while like that, just giving you lots of rules and ideas. But I wanted to tell a story, and it's an important story. Once upon a time, in a faraway land, there was a young king named John Sigismund. He lived by these ideas. As an adult, he was not like other kings. Most kings wanted everyone to believe the same religion. But John had a different idea. Now, when he was just a baby, little baby, newborn, the king, his father, died. So little John grew up with this big job waiting for him, always moving towards it, ruling a kingdom. And his mom, whose name was Isabella, his mom did all the work. She ruled the country for a long time, waiting until he was old enough. So it's a picture of Queen, I think. This was in the year, he was born in the year 1540. 1540. Now, what year is it now? 2025. So that meant almost 500 years, 490 years ago he was born. At that time, Christians around the world had started to argue and disagree about who could rule them. They were arguing and sometimes fighting wars about their religious differences. And each king, each ruler wanted to choose the right religion for everyone in their country. Kings and queens would punish people for holding different beliefs than their own. Meanwhile, Muslims, who didn't follow the Christian religion and had very different ideas about exactly what religion was about, were invading and rising up. There was a huge empire, the Ottoman Empire, and it was invading Europe, the European countries, from the south. And the empire was ruled by Suleiman the Magnificent. He took over the country where John was king and where he and his mom lived. So Isabella took John before the emperor, the Muslim emperor. When he was only 1 year old, his mom carried him to the capital of her country, to meet him there. And the emperor did not force them to be Muslims. He affirmed that John would be the king, and he would be the Christian king of his people. Suleiman also let John's mom, Isabella, continue to rule at least half of the land that they were ruling before. So already he's talking, listening, working on a plan together with others, trying to figure out how to work things instead of trying to kill them all or force them. Right? When John was an adult in 1556, he met Suleiman again. He went to see the emperor again. And there he was confirmed as king. But the people of John's land wanted to know what kind of Christians they were going to be. They were still arguing about different kinds of Christians. And John did something really unexpected. He called for people to all come together into the capital city and talk it out. He invited great thinkers and speakers to argue in front of everyone. And he listened carefully, thoughtfully. What kind of Christians would they be? Would they be Catholic Christians or Lutheran Christians or Calvinist Christians or Unitarian Christians? In the end, King John decided that he was Unitarian. And so he was the only Unitarian king in the history of the world. But then, to the surprise of everyone else, he said, Let people believe what they believe. We don't all have to be the same to live in peace. He told the governors of his country to declare an edict of tolerance. In 1568, he said, faith is a gift from God, not a matter of law. He made it illegal to punish anyone for their religion. This had never happened in Europe before. But after that, many countries began to declare religious tolerance as a law of their lands. In response, some said that if Jesus was the Prince of Peace, then John was the King of Tolerance. So with that story and those ideas, I invite any who are children and want to go to the classes to go. Please make a little arch in the middle of the room. I don't know, now, does Claudia want to go through the arch? Okay, good. Each other to find meaning in the spirit of love that we share.
Now go with each other to find meaning in the spirit of love that we share. Today I'd like to read some of the key ideas from the UU Statement of Conscience, titled Creating Peace, which received overwhelming positive votes at the National UU Conference in 2010. There are 6 points. 1. Our commitment to creating peace calls us to the work of peace building, peacemaking, and peacekeeping. Peace building is the creation and support of institutions and structures that address the roots of conflict. Peacemaking is the negotiation of equitable and sustainable peace agreements, mediation between hostile parties, and post-conflict rebuilding and reconciliation. Peacekeeping is early intervention to prevent war, stop genocide, and monitor ceasefires. 2. We advocate a culture of peace through a transformation of public policies, religious consciousness, and individual lifestyles. At the heart of this transformation is the readiness to honor the truths of multiple voices from a theology of covenant grounded in love. 3. We all agree that our initial response to conflict should be the use of nonviolent methods. Yet we bear witness to the right of individuals and nations to defend themselves. Many of us believe force is sometimes necessary as a last resort, while others of us believe in the consistent practice of nonviolence. 4. We repudiate aggressive and preventive wars, the disproportionate use of force, covert wars, and targeting that includes a high risk to civilians. We support international efforts to curtail the vast world trade in armaments and call for nuclear disarmament. In an interdependent world, true peace requires the cooperation of all nations and peoples. 5. For Unitarian Universalists, the exercise of individual conscience is holy work. Conscientious discernment leads us to engage in the creation of peace in different ways. We affirm a range of individual choices, including military service and conscientious objection. And 6, our faith calls us to create peace, yet we confess that too often we have allowed various problems to distract us from all that we can do together. This statement of conscience challenges individual Unitarian Universalists, as well as our congregations and the association, to engage with more depth, persistence, and creativity in the complex task of creating peace.
Thank you, Chris. I was very much involved with the process of creating that statement, and it was truly inspiring, amazing, interesting, thought-provoking, challenging to see the conflicts, the differences, and the ways in which we came up as an entire national association with a statement as strong, as clear as this one is. Now it is time to take a step towards the center of our congregation and create connections and community. We do this by sharing joys and sorrows, things to honor, things to remember in our lives. We'll do this by speaking our names and lighting a candle, if we wish, coming forward. Or there will be time for silent lighting of candles. If you come forward, if you speak, make sure that you have permission to share anything that you share. Make sure you're not giving announcements, but sharing something of significance and meaning in your life. Always remember to speak clearly to the microphone and say your name first. Assalamu alaikum. Peace. I want peace to be on and with and for all of you. We all want peace for ourselves and for others. But more than that, I want you all to be builders of peace. Jesus is often called the Prince of Peace. You may know that the last line of our story for all ages today was a reference to the Jewish prophet Isaiah, writing hundreds of years before Jesus lived. Christian theologians assume that he was speaking about Jesus Christ when in chapter 6 Isaiah wrote, "For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders, and he will be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace." You've heard that, right? I've heard a story about this prince the other day. Aliens come to visit the earth. Extraterrestrials. A huge ship falls into orbit around our earth, and messages are sent in every language saying that they come in peace and they want to meet the most powerful leaders. And to everyone's surprise, they first ask to meet with Pope Leo XIV. The extraterrestrials go to the Vatican. After initial sort of pleasantries, the Catholic Pope asks them, "Do you know about our Lord Savior Jesus Christ?" One responds, "Oh, you mean Jesus the Great? Yeah, we know him. He's the best, isn't he? He shows up every year to make sure that we're doing great." Surprised, the Pope says, "Every year? He comes to you every year? He only came once, and we've been waiting 2 millenniums for him to come a second time." And he seems kind of irritated. We were still waiting for him to come back. And the alien says, "I can see you're upset, but who knows? It's some small little thing. It can't be a big deal. Maybe he just likes our chocolates better." And the Pope says, "Chocolates? What are you talking about, chocolates? What does that have to do with anything?" And he goes, "Well, when he first arrived, we knew exactly who he was, and we celebrated with a big party that had chocolates, and he liked our chocolates so much that every year he comes back, we give him another box of chocolates." What did you guys do when he came? Today I will talk about building peace. Not just making peace with resolving conflicts with people, not just peacekeeping where you're keeping people from getting back into conflict, but really building the power, the capacity, the habits, the patterns that allow for creating peace every day. To build peace, you have to understand and undermine the sources that turn conflicts violent into wars. To act before fear and anger inspires violence, but even to act before it separates people, divides people. I've known brothers and sisters who stopped talking to each other because of a fight and a disagreement. They did not know how to rebuild the peace, nonetheless. Heal. To act before fear and anger takes control. You have to go beyond peacemaking, which is the resolution and healing from conflict, and move to build peace. I'm glad that Lynn is following this service. Lynn Masden is following this service next week with a service on finding inner peace, because that's essential for building peace. I'm certain that Lynn is going to go further than the old adage which says the path to inner peace begins with 3 words: not my problem. Any conflict is our problem. Any ways in which people divide from one another, lean towards violence, is our problem. We are all affected. Unitarian Universalism always calls us to this deeper truth, and it's a social grounding. Peace is not just something that I feel, something that I experience. It's something that I share with others. It begins with justice, those signs with the beavers that say, and it's appeared in most of the protests we've had in downtown Wenatchee, no justice, K-N-O-W, no justice, no peace. Echo of no justice, then there is N-O, there's no peace. Lately, one of the most tragic stories in the news has been the murder of a young couple from Israel in our nation's capital. Our president said in response, "Hatred and radicalism have no place in the USA." If you're politically oriented like me, you find that a very ironic statement coming from him. But it's just not enough to condemn others. It's not enough to condemn violence. Healing needs to begin with regret and understanding and the seeking of understanding. That murder is one violent response of one Palestinian who sees Israel's action in Gaza as a punitive, even destructive war to remove them from the land of Israel. Every day, that more and more innocent people are killed on one side or the other only deepens the anger, deepens the despair. It is not resolving the conflict to just say, oh, people shouldn't be killed. There needs to be a seeking of a solution, to think of all the possible solutions. Remember the little boy and the girl sitting there with their book thinking, well, what can we do? And then choosing a course of action. And our country should be leading those people in hearing one another, working together, going beyond fear and anger and despair. I remember my time working in St. Louis. Young people. There was one young man who had gone off to college. In St. Louis, it had been a racially segregated and was still largely racially segregated city. It struggled through the 20th century to kind of dissolve some of that, but the North City was still clearly the place of black people. Many of the wealthiest and most productive black people had moved out into the suburbs. There were desegregated suburbs and segregated suburbs, but they had moved away, and so they had left all the impoverished, poorly educated youth and adults in the North City. And it was like a wasteland. There were empty houses and houses that had been torn down, and there was violence. And I remember a young man who had come back from college to engage, after Michael Brown, to engage in the Black Lives Matter protests, giving up his college education to get involved and to make a difference. And he was speaking in a public forum, and he talked about what it's like when you have nothing. You have so little that even just your name on a street sign, on a wall, mattered. The way in which young men with nothing, no hope, no possibilities for a job, were fighting with each other for whatever little scrap of power, significance, importance they could get. He was trying to get us to understand the ways in which we needed to empower young people so that they were no longer frightened, alone, despairing, poor, hungry. Give them opportunities, he was saying. Black Lives Matter sign appeared on the Unitarian Church in St. Louis. It's been hurt. That church, by the way, has recently been hurt by the tornadoes, and so I didn't light a candle for them, but my heart has been, they had to move all their worship online because the building was damaged. When I went to protests in Ferguson, we were confronted by an armored vehicle owned by the county, bought from an army surplus sale. 500 days of protest, only 2 days with some property damage, and yet the shadow of war and violence. There was a machine gun mounted on top of that armored vehicle to create peace, apparently. It only just warned us. Danger and violence and fear. And we rose up stronger, committed to justice, committed to changing the world, committed to make things better. Get to know each other, made alliances across the city. Friendships were formed. And that is the seeds of power and goodness. I want you to remember the story also that we told last December, early part of December. I always talk about peace in December, mostly because people get stressed during Christmas season. But people had from 5 nations in this country, in the land, the continent of North America, had been at war with one another at one point or another. And then there was a prophet named Peacemaker and the warrior Hiawatha. And they came and called these people together and stood against the one warlord who was driving all the other violence. They defeated him. They defeated him in the end by all the people of the 5 nations coming together and singing a song of peace that they had learned under the tree of peace, where they had decided to all become one people. The Iroquois Confederacy were originally 5 independent nation states bound by the desire to come together in time immemorial. There were no written records of that gathering, but they had lived by that for centuries together. The Iroquois Confederacy included the Mohawks and the Oneidas and the Onondagas and the Cayugas and the Senecas. They had unified under this great tree of peace. And then in 1772, the Tuscarora nation also joined with them. It is now known as the 6 Nations. And they call themselves the Haudenosaunee, the builders of the Longhouse. And that community, governed by the great law of peace, is the oldest participatory democracy on earth, it's argued. It had much influence on Benjamin Franklin and John Hancock and Thomas Jefferson, the first 2 Unitarian presidents of this country. All the authors of the Constitution of the United States were inspired by this knowledge of the Iroquois Confederacy. It helped inspire those who would work to form a democracy on this land. But our nation, instead of living under the tree of peace, has been entangled with wars since our inception. We have never gone for more than a decade. This country has never gone for more than a decade without fighting a violent, militarized war against some other nation, whether it was the First Nations of this land, or Mexico, or Germany, or Russia. We have been fighting against Spain, but Canada. How do we undo that habit as a nation? For one image of how peace building happens, not just in big, consequential decisions made at the level of government, but also because of that and in a relationship with that. When I was 17 years old, the President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, who we mention in a little bumper sticker over there that says, "What would Jimmy do?" He reinstated the Selective Service. All males, no females were allowed, just only men were supposed to register to be drafted for the war, for any possible war. Conscientious objection was not allowed for registration. So I stood with others outside the post office for most of a month before the deadline in protest. I was not going to register. And then I told my parents, told each one separately. And they each said that it was good to hold to my principles, and they both agreed that war was bad. My dad had fought for the United States in Korea. So he had seen the grind of war and people that he knew killed and wondered how many he had killed. But then both of them, in their own ways, explained that if I did not register, I would not be able to get a federally backed loan for a college degree, right? And they said, both of them, in the end, my protest would not change that much. But getting a college degree and getting some work inspired and guided by that degree could change a whole lot more. And so I went and I filled out the registration card, and under my signature, I wrote, "Under protest." The act of starting the registration was, now I understand, a brilliant act. In response to the Russian invasion of Afghanistan, I understand Russian invasion and Afghanistan this morning, right? You can still feel the consequences of it. President Carter decided not to appease the hawkish warmongers among us by saying that we really needed a full mobilization. He just simply said, well, we'll register, young men. And since then, we haven't engaged in a full out-and-out war. Since then, we've still engaged in all sorts of military and violent conflicts in Iran and other places. But we have not gone out and out, declared war against Russia. Through other countries, through Ukraine, right? But not directly, and not mobilizing our people to go and fight people of other countries. We are still seeking to build the structures, trying to be a part of what builds the structures that create peace. And in this congregation, we talk about entering community intentionally. We have a great, great covenant. Living our values with grace and love and celebration every day. We do this by listening with kindness and respect here, by speaking honestly, with sensitivity, acting with compassion. A simple description of our mission and our covenant and our purpose is to seek and embrace and serve. And when we fall out of covenant, the words say, we recognize, we reflect, we re-engage, we forgive. And we start again. If only everyone in the world would claim and join in that same sort of covenant, that same commitment to build peace amongst each other, to listen to one another, to create community intentionally. And now, all the problems that we're faced, environment, generative, artificial intelligence, all being possibly driven, well, clearly, climate is driven by a competitive struggle for dominance in what is now a global economy. In the midst of that, we must call on all our representatives, call on ourselves, call on everyone to support diplomacy, to support the structures that nurture human rights and disarmament and generosity and sharing. If only everyone in the world would claim and join in the same covenant that we have claimed. In our congregation, we can be a model of peaceful, justice-rooted community. And this place will become a peace building, a building in which we build peace for all. Now I invite the choir up to sing a response.
And now it's time for our offertory, a spiritual practice that expresses our gratitude and generosity. Joyfully sharing our gifts and strengths in service to the greater good is one way we create the beloved community. We will now receive the offering. We are blessed by your generosity. May your gifts make a difference in our community through the ministries of this church. And now let's rise in body or in spirit to sing together hymn 159, This Is My Song. The tune is by Jan Sibelius and is the national anthem of Finland.
Before we extinguish the chalice, let me just say these words. Under the shadow of war, under the shadow of grief and Memorial Day, may we walk in the light of peace building, of love, and all the lands and people of this good earth. Amen.
And now, as we extinguish our chalice, please join in saying the words printed in your order of service or on the screens. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts and embody in our lives until we are together again. And our tradition is to join hand in a circle and sing once more together.